And welcome everyone to another brand new edition of RockM Radio, another episode of Dive Cuts. I am your host, Sam Snelling. With me, to your right on the screen, Matthew Harris is on time. We're starting on time. It's 8:01. How
Yeah.
about that? Starting on time, live broadcast for our RockM Plus subscribers. We're excited to be here. We're going to talk some Josh Gray and some 2025 recruits. Mr. Harris, how are you tonight?
I'm fine. I'm normally punctual. Last week was the outlier, but we've moved, at least in this neck of the woods, from watching 7-foot German guys play in the post to going back to the EYBL streams. It's just one stream, one scouting realm to the next here. But otherwise, I'm good. And I'm pretty sure we're going to get the nasty weather you all had today. So, no, thank you. I don't like what you're sending east, or what you're sending east from the St. Louis metro area. Please, we don't want that here. You can keep it.
So you all might actually be okay. Look, it does seem like if you're watching this and you're in the state of Missouri, I hope you made it out okay. The southern portions of the state actually got pretty brutalized by some bad weather. I am on the north side of St. Louis County, and so we had a little bit of thunder, a little bit of lightning, some rain, no hail. Made it out all right. So I'm doing maybe you'll get the weather that we got, which was not that bad.
Yeah, maybe
like normal springtime kind of stuff.
Otherwise, it's slow. May 1 got here and portal season abruptly slowed. So it's I think we're just waiting out one more spot. So hopefully we'll be done in short order and we can shift more fully into off-season mode. But we'll talk a little 2025 recruiting tonight to sort of fill the gap until we hit a little slower period in the calendar.
Yeah. So we can hop in. At this point,
that's it. That's
if
where we are.
If you're watching and not listening to the podcast feed, you'll see on the screen it just says Josh Gray.
Yeah.
That is the board right now. I said on the RockM.Plus forums the other day that I think we're kind of anticipating that. So today is Wednesday, May 8th. So we're expecting that Gray will hit campus at some point between today, maybe as late as like Saturday, probably the latest. But that's when he will land on campus and begin his visit. At which point I would sort of wager that the odds of a commitment coming off that, now maybe not immediately, but within a few days, possibly up to a week, that you would see a commitment. If a commitment doesn't happen, then you're probably hard resetting the board.
As always, I'm not wagering anything until we hear for certain that a visit is happening and whatever. I always think that I'm probably less of a tea reader, more of a concrete guy, but I do feel safe saying that right now the board probably is Josh Gray. I'm looking at a list right now that's a combination of Evan Mia and on threes, composite stuff. 42 of the top 50 bigs are gone. They're off the market. They're committed. 2 more have been forecasted to leave. So we are at 6 of the top 50 left. One of them is Josh Gray. Missouri has had no involvement with the other 5. So I try and be cautious, about, timing of visits and commitments, but you look at the board, it's one name. that has reported verifiable connections to this, retooling effort. Um, it was finals week and graduation week last week in the other Columbia. It is finals and graduation week this week in our Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
So that might explain a little bit of a lag if there's a visit that's got to get done. Is Josh has to do some administrative stuff on his end, and then the staff, is still gonna be normal staff stuff this week. They're gonna have guys getting ready to graduate. There may be families around that are coming in for graduates. There's stuff that sort of happens administratively. But by next week, they've got to pretty much have this done if he's the guy. I mean, there is a dead period that is 1 day on Sunday on May 12.
Yeah.
There is a live period next weekend on the 17th to the 19th. Most staffs will take off probably the day before. So realistically, you're looking at tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You got 6 days before around graduation stuff, around administrative stuff, and before you got to get out on the road. If they don't get anything done before the 19th, there's only 2 days back. So the 20th and the 21st, and then a dead period that runs for 2 weeks. So realistically, they got 8 days, 8 functional days to wrap this down. So if Gray is the only name, if he is atop the board, just process of elimination tells you they got to move it pretty quick. Even if I don't know timing at this point specifically, just the recruiting calendar and the big man board tells you this thing has to be on some sort of timeline to finish if Gray's the guy. So we'll wait, we'll see. And, if, like you said, if they don't take Gray, man, the board here, I don't even know what's really left after that. I haven't looked lower than 500th, number 500 in the recruiting rankings.
Mm-hmm.
This is it pretty much. And if you're not looking to take a complete flyer on a guy, that's not to downplay what Gray is. We talked about him last week, but you can't really wait this out much longer unless you're going to suddenly be ripe with NIL cash for some of the other bigs that are in the draft process. But our information is that's not where they are. So we'll watch, we'll wait, and we'll see what Josh does and what the program does. But that's, really just sort of where we are right now, is in a holding pattern.
It's been a little frustrating too, as I think a lot of us, myself included, probably yourself, would like this to be wrapped up. I'm ready to put the spring period, let's wrap it up in a bow. Let's close the portal for University of Missouri men's basketball program, and let's move on. From a larger standpoint, taking a step back and kind of looking at the work that they've done, it's going to be important for us to be able to take the stock that's necessary and look at what Missouri's been able to add along with the freshman recruiting class, everyone who did not enter the transfer portal and is coming back from the roster, and all of that, and then compare it to what the other teams in the SEC. And you were kind of doing a little bit of that today, just sort of taking stock of, where all these other rosters are. If you're on the forums, you have a link to the SEC transfer tracker, which is a good resource that we keep updated with all the kind of movement. I mean, and there are a lot of rosters with a lot of, bodies that are still outstanding, so Missouri to be in the position where they're only waiting out one spot. It looks like they knew who they want. He's hitting campus at some point in the very near future. They're probably his best offer. They're probably going to be able to provide the most lucrative NIL situation for him because of that. It seems like if we could just wrap this up, it would put us in a really nice position to be able to start, taking stock and kind of assigning a little bit more of a position on like where we can kind of expect this team to be next season.
Yeah. There was the old Chappelle Show skit, which I'm sure a certain generation won't remember anymore, where it was just the wrap it up button. That's where we are. Just wrap it up, B. Yo, it's done. Wrap it up. That right now with the returning production that they're bringing back, Missouri's probably middle of the pack, 7th or 8th in the SEC. They're going to be bringing in probably their talent acquisition is probably going to be among the top 4 at this point, or that's where it sits. So top half in returning production, top 4 in talent acquisition in terms of overall recruiting rank, with Texas, Alabama, and Arkansas. I mean, we'll have to really get into the nitty gritty. We'll have to look at, what all these other rosters look like. That'll probably happen after the draft withdrawal deadline happens. But if you sit here right now and you were to just say, okay, you brought back as much key production as you could, you've clearly brought in, ample talent. You'd hope that right now, just off the cuff, that this is a top half of the, league type of roster. If you're among the top 8, probably in this expanded league, that probably puts you in line for an at-large bid. Where you are in that pecking order, we'll have to, like you said, we'll have to flesh that out once we see full rosters. But I don't think anybody right now, even before Josh Gray decides, could look at this roster and say, maybe NIT. This is probably a roster that I think not unreasonably people are going to say they kept enough production of good guys. They've gotten, at least 2 or 3 starters out of the portal. They're bringing in a top 5 recruiting class of freshmen. That should be enough to put together a tournament roster. So I think that's a pretty basic spot here. So the question realistically is, can you just get Josh Gray in so you can begin to really just sort of say, okay, we can now really project out what this group is going to do. But, back of the envelope here, I would not have a problem saying or writing down, this should be a tournament level roster, right now in May.
At the very least, they should win.
They're going to win basketball.
Probably more than one conference game.
Yes.
Probably.
Bar is very low for a bounce back year. But, yeah. But the staff would probably like to have it done because they got to go on the road in 9 days and start trying to get the 2025 class sealed up. So we're basically on a clock here of 9 to 10 days before this thing needs to start shifting to off-season workouts, getting the 2025 class together.
Well, let's do it then. Let's talk about the 2025 recruiting. I did already kind of post something. Mainly, I sort of noticed that the last couple of years I've done like all right, like here's kind of the guys that we are going to be paying closer attention to, and as we've gotten to kind of know the staff and sort of like their preferences and what they are seeking out, it's a lot easier to sort of ascertain who are like kind of going to be the prime targets. And I think like that's a big deal. Is like, year one, I think they're in a little bit of scramble mode. They're trying to kind of make up some relationship stuff. It's one of the reasons why they took guys that they already had, 2 guys who already had pre-existing relationships with, and that's Ant Robinson and Jordan Butler. And then obviously, they did a bit of a sprint with Trent Pierce and got that one knocked down. But then this last cycle was a cycle where, a lot of those guys were guys that they had a longer period of time to recruit. And now with the 2025 class, it's going to be kind of the same thing. And I think one of the things that, if you are so inclined to be on RockM Nation in the last few days, you may have noticed the 2025 names to watch. The best part, the best news, I think, of all this is that they've already kind of got a very key position on board when they got the commitment from Aaron Rowe last December. Getting a sort of like a top 25, top 30 level, point guard, position of need. I'm I will stand on a soapbox and yell about how each class should have a point guard, a post, and a wing. Depends if you want like a big wing or a small wing, but essentially, like I think you should have a 3-man class of those 3 positions every year.
Mhm.
But getting your point guard on board early was really, really important.
Yeah, I think when they were able to secure Aaron Rowe in early December of 2023, that gave them a tent pole to really sort of build around. And I think the nice thing is now they can go out in this time of year, or even when they start to get into visits in June, July, August, and be able to point to someone and say, "You've seen Aaron playing, on the circuit. Aaron's played in multiple USA basketball mini camps. You've seen him at USA basketball mini camps. You've seen him, at Link Academy, on the NIBC. You've seen him on the EYBL. The kind of player that you're getting, and that we're going to be bringing in here. There's going to be no question about who the point guard is, and so they can really, I think, sell some continuity at that position. If Ant, continues to develop, they can point to that and say these are going to be the guys you play with in the next couple of years. We've already got this settled. We've got a pretty good sense of the guys that are going to be running our offense for you, and even To and from last year's class, is a guy that has played at some top prep schools, against top prep school competitions, played on the EYBL, has been in places where he's played with other guys that they're recruiting. So he won't be complete. They may not have played alongside him, but they may know him a little bit, may have seen him in some other games. So I think there's some ideas there that you can at least pitch. You've seen kind of the caliber of player we're bringing in. The offense we're going to run. This is a pretty easy thing for you to project how this might look with us. I think the difference is going to be, what do they want to do, in the other 2 slots. They hosted Dorian Jones last month, a combo guard out of Ohio. I think Jones had sort of opened things up a little bit after Ohio State made a coaching change, but Jake Diebler had been recruiting him before that change, and now Jake Diebler has the job. His comments coming out of that visit, were pretty milk with toast. They were pretty much, oh, there was a nice staff. They had nice trainers. It's a good facility, like all the usual stuff that, I think when we've seen Missouri have success on visits, they've really gushed about. Coach really ran me through this detailed plan. And, there was, if you read the comments sort of on every other program and then compared to what he says about Ohio State, I think it makes it pretty clear that maybe Ohio State's back in a chief position to win there. So I've been a little hesitant to look at Jones, but after that, it's really, I think, sort of a shorter board than even what we saw last summer. So I think that's the one thing I think people should look at too, is they know what they have in Rowe. They know what they have behind him, but they also seem to have some pretty good clarity in terms of what the priorities are, as they go out onto the circuit this summer. I think last year the board was a little bit longer in terms of guys they were monitoring and tracking. I think this year it's probably like 5 or 6 tops, maybe at this point, and for maybe 3 spots in the class. It feels like everything's a little bit more focused, a little bit more, I think condensed, and that's a good thing at this point. And there's some clarity in terms of, they're not going to have to wonder about the top, guy on the board. They've got him in hand. So I think there's just a little bit more clarity, a little bit more structure, and hopefully that leads to some efficient results for them, once we get into the later part of the summer.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like when you sort of construct, a post like this, and you're trying to sort of, draw out, who are really going to be the guys that are going to stand out. Like, who are we going to be watching the most? And the first guy that I really want to talk about is Chuck Love. So there are guys that are on the list that are higher ranked. There are guys that I think a lot of there's Bishop. Say hi, Bishop. But guys that I think are going to draw interest from from fans because of their ranking. And Love isn't a guy who's like super highly rated right now. I think he last I checked was in like the 60s or 70s. Yeah. Which is nothing to frown upon as Missouri program who has not always recruited at this level. But there are a lot of things that I really like about Love and Love's game. Make sure if you decide to Google him, you may want to add a junior in there because there are some questionable things that his dad was involved with. No longer working at the University of Nebraska as a women's basketball coach, but separating that part of it, coming from a the stock of having a parent in the coaching industry and kind of knowing how to develop talent. Love is a guy who seems to me that could have a very high ceiling.
Yeah, Love was a guy that I think has sort of come through the MoCan pipeline. He was in Lincoln, played, there for a while, had kind of made the trip south to be in the MoCan program, head of last season. Made the jump to La Lumiere, which is a pretty good basketball factory in my neck of the woods, a little bit north of us here in Indiana, kind of around the Fort Wayne area.
LaPorte, right?
LaPorte, yeah. So it's up kind of in northeastish Indiana, but really respected program. Love came in there and was sort of a reserve guy for them this year, kind of a 3-and-D guy, came off the bench. Struggled a little bit shooting the ball, but that's sort of his forte is shooting off the catch. But he really caught some eyes last June at sort of the Nike Elite 100. Had a pretty good wrap down to his time on the 16U circuit with MoCan. Was a solid, role guy, for Lalu this year, and has really sort of come on as sort of the starter for MoCan out on the circuit this summer. Kind of still a 3-and-D guy. The handle's got to tighten up a little bit, playing in straight lines to tighten up. But when he's, locked in, the shooting mechanics are really, really good. Really, really solid base, gets established, quiet lower half, I'd say. Really clean, repeatable mechanics. I always say, slow can also be smooth. I think his shooting mechanics are really smooth. And at this point, defensively, he is a bigger wing type. His frame is probably going to need some weight to fill in a little bit. He's, you can tell he's still probably growing into a 6'6", 6'7" frame, but he's a straight 3-and-D guy right now. Probably a little bit stronger though than like a Trent Pierce, but you can kind of see what the mold is for him if you fit him in to sort of what Missouri's put at that 3 spot. Honor Batang is a powerful straight line driver, wants to attack in transition. Marcus Allen, is probably that 3-4-ish hybrid type of guy on the wing, can cut, can flash, can do a lot of different stuff for you there. Love, if they were to land him, would sort of bring in that 3-and-D element for them at that spot. So if you fit him into kind of the panoply of what Missouri's done at that wing spot, he makes sense. You have a really highly rated slasher in Honor Batang. You've got kind of a jack of all trades right now in Marcus Allen. This team's going to need spacers to make it work. Chuck Love is a natural fit for that. And if you feel like you develop Honor Batang really well, that's going to be a guy who's going to probably take the lion's share of the minutes as a sophomore. There's some room to sort of get, Chuck Love integrated. So I think it makes sense from, a body type perspective, from a roster need perspective, and at least from a timeline for them. So really, really interesting guy. And by all accounts, Missouri's right there in the mix for him. It's a pretty regional recruitment. I think Illinois is also being considered right there for him. But this should be one where if you're Missouri, there's a lot of things that go into this that make you think this should be a guy we have a really good chance to close, when July and August get here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's kind of why he's towards the top of their board. And maybe he's not like the highest rated wing that they're recruiting, but I think he's a guy that they could certainly lock down if
they pushed
out that way. Yeah. So like the next thing that, the next kind of player that I wanted to talk about is Jalen Harrelson, who's another Lalu player, La Lumiere. For those who don't know, Lalu is sort of like the shorthand for La Lumiere. Missouri, I think, probably surprised some people for being on the list when he cut down to 9 earlier this year. Harrelson is kind of like a top 10, top 12 level guy, 5-star player. He is an Indiana native. All the Indiana schools are hot on his trail. Some may be stronger than others. There's a couple blue bloods. You certainly have, Duke, Michigan State, I believe Kansas was on there as well. Maybe a new blood in Gonzaga.
Auburn was on there too.
Yeah, so it was a top 9, so Zags, Duke, Auburn, Indiana, Notre Dame, Purdue, KU, Michigan State, and Mizzou. It's a deep list, and certainly, like, I don't think, sort of, in the opposite of, like, if Missouri really wanted to sort of close down Chuck Love quickly, I feel like I feel like maybe they could. I think they probably feel like maybe they could. And I think that Harrelson is a guy who is so versatile that I sort of view him as a wild card in the class. And that if, like, you don't count on this recruitment, but if you can get him, you take him.
You make room for him.
Yeah.
Like, he's the guy that makes you go from 3 to 4. Like, that's, like, I think the thing that I've heard pretty consistently, from various people, that I trust is, 3 is probably the right number. When you're looking at how Missouri's built this roster, moving ahead, I think last year they would have stopped at 4, but, Trent Burns was somebody that, we thought, was probably their 2025 recruit. He was going to need a year. They didn't really see, many 5s that they were in love with. So they just took him a year early. So that probably meant that they went one more than they wanted. 3 is the number I would start with right now. And that's probably, a point, a wing, and a big. And we'll talk about the big here in a minute. But Harrelson is from like northeast of me. I can be at Fishers High School in 20 minutes. It's, the east side of Indy has some really, really good suburban schools. Fishers is, in a really, really deep, regional too. So he's playing exceptionally good high school talent here. Then he moved to LaLu. So he's had a pretty good trajectory here. Indy Heat, does a great job with developing guys. So he's in a really strong program here. And that's really sort of accentuated his versatility. I think if you tune in to watch him, a normal possession shows that, like, he will bring the ball up the floor, enter it to a big at the elbow. So he will walk the ball up, initiate the offense, cut, bury a smaller defender in the paint. If he doesn't get it there, he'll flex out, and then he can space. So you're seeing him play the 1, basically the 4 and the 3 in the span of a first trigger set there. Elite athlete, really good in transition. Shooting mechanics, I think the lower half can be a little bit inconsistent at times, but still, that's about getting in the gym and getting consistent reps. He's a good second side creator, driving and, making some good passing reads. So there are times where, depending on your lineup, depending on your needs, you could count on him doing a little bit of 1 through 4. But if your lineup in your rotation is that he's a solid straight wing, he can do all the things you want a straight wing to do, slash, drive. He's a good cutter. So I think that versatility is the thing that, makes him stand out so much. And he competes on the defensive end consistently. Sometimes gets caught in some bad cross matches because they switch, and, if he's on a, bigger post, it's going to go poorly sometimes. But I just think that's the thing that jumps out to me here is you can see what Missouri thinks here, which is we don't have to really question. We can use him 1 through 4. Depending on our lineup, we can go into any different part of the playbook. He's a smart kid. He's a smart player. We can just flex him wherever we need him to go, and we're going to get an elite level athlete that's skilled. And I think that's the biggest allure there is I don't know if they've had a player that they've recruited in that just has that kind of versatility mixed with the high level athleticism that Jalen Harrelson does. So if he wants to come here, please take him. Like, I'm not like, figure out the roster math later. He's really, really good. And not just in sort of a way that I think, we look at sometimes these ratings these are live wire NBA bodies. Yeah. Jalen Harrelson has that, and he's a really, really smart, heady basketball player too. So that's what puts him over the top for me.
Yeah, it's like, you and I it's been a few years, but we were going to the Nike Elite 100 on SLU's campus, and you can walk in the door and you can see
That's a
guys
pro.
who, yeah, like you walk in, you see Paolo Banchero, even as a 16-year-old, you're like, that's what an NBA player looks like.
That's what it is with Jalen Harrelson. You walk in and go, yeah, that's a pro. That's a pro.
Yeah.
And there's even a kid that in 2026 that like I would say is that right now on Mocan's roster, having even watched like Chuck Love, it's Tristan Reed. Like I've seen Tristan Reed play live 3 times with John Burroughs, and like you'll watch him walk in the gym and go, that's a pro.
Yeah.
That's just a dude, 16 years old, looks like he could walk in and start from Missouri Day. Like there's just guys who you go, yeah,
I get
robot.
it. I get
it. Don't need to watch him play. I see what the allure is.
I don't mean to get like too sidetracked, but I was watching the OKC and Dallas game last night, and Chet Holmgren obviously was playing, and that was a guy that I remember us watching. And I mean, again, like at the Elite 100 is an event that's mainly like it's younger kids. Like there's not a lot of like kids that are going to be seniors that year.
It's all rising sophomores and juniors.
Yeah.
Rising juniors.
So this is seeing Chet a couple years before he was he was a top 2 or 3 player.
Pro.
And yeah, and you walk in and he was a absolute beanpole. But the
talking
thing that
shit to everybody, and it was
like
awesome.
The thing that I loved about him, like he was not afraid of meeting people at the rim, even if there was somebody who could stuff him into it. And it's just like just an elite level competitiveness. And yeah, I think it's funny to like he's only maybe it looks like he's only added maybe 15 or 20 pounds. Obviously, it's been a little bit more than that, but yeah, funny walking in and seeing Paolo one year and then the next year showing up and seeing Chet. Hopefully we can get back to those events here soon. I think they stopped bringing them to St. Louis, so it's like COVID.
They brought it back for the first time last year.
Yeah,
but Harrelson's a guy. You make room for him. Absolutely make room for him if you can get him in here. And I think the last sort of piece for them is a big, and I say big sort of in a very flexible way, and that's probably Nick Randall out of V-Side, Vashon.
Yeah.
Whose frame is really filled in the last 2 years or so. Not that he was lean, but he's like put on good mass. He's stronger now. You can definitely see that through his core and his upper legs. So I think that's the one thing that sort of I hadn't seen him in a long time until I went back to Vashon's winter tournament, and like he had clearly filled in his frame, and that's what stood out to me. The skill level is coming along. I think the hard part, when you see guys at V-Side, is just the stylistic play they have there, which is you played against it, which is assertive, up tempo pressing. I think anybody who follows basketball in the state knows V-Side's mentality and their approach. But he's the one thing I like seeing him with BBE is they press, but they drop, more into traditional man, and they will come down and they'll run more base set offense stuff. So it's really, if you want to see like V-Side guys, it's great to see him in the summer with like BBE or other travel teams, because you see him kind of in a different, stylistic context. And, you can see that he's putting the pieces together. He can catch now at the nail, turn, get to a good face-up jumper. He's trying to drive it a little bit more there. He's playing out of the mid-post a little bit. The post-up finishes are a little bit inconsistent, but the shooting stroke looks really, really good, as a trailer, sometimes at the elbow and the nail, so you can see him step out in space. It's a really smooth-looking jumper, too. Like, the closest thing I have is, like, it's got a little bit of that tilt, kind of like LaMarcus Aldridge's has when he would reverse pivot out and kind of face with it. Yeah. Just really clean, really compact. Clearly getting used to it. The other thing he can do is he can grab and he can push and come down and initiate for you. He's not going to come down and run a ball screen, but he can grab, maybe play in the secondary break, but at a minimum, he can grab and bring the ball up for you against pressure. So that's a nice thing. His size means he can defend 5. So I think he sort of straddles the line as a 4-5 on offense, but he's big enough to where like, every time I've seen him play this spring, I think I've seen 5 of his 6 games with BBE. He's solid in the post. So I think that's sort of the guy that, he's low in the rankings right now because I don't know if the offensive skill piece is there, but I watch him as a defender and think, okay, he's maybe a guy that they would have wanted ahead of like a Jordan Butler because physically he's developed and he's not afraid to play physically in the paint. He's not afraid to defend that spot. You can't put your shoulder through his chest. And if he's come out of V side that he's going to play with intensity. So I think like that's the thing that gets me excited about him is the offensive piece. I think, has made some progress, but you're not going to question the physicality, the ability to defend the 5, the toughness, and the tenacity to do that. So I think he's a guy that at the 5, that 4-5 kind of position would be a great fit for them if they can close that down. And obviously they've put in a lot of time there as well. He was an early priority for them in 25 and has sort of stayed that way throughout the process.
Yeah, he was one of their first offers.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the time, I think like I feel like Jamie Shaw from On3 had a tweet that listed him at like 6'10". And I don't like.
I've seen some at
like
6'9", 6'8". Like I would really like for him to get to a camp so we can measure him.
Yeah, like that would be helpful. But I still think like anywhere between 6'8" and 6'10", I think you're looking at that kind of like 4-5 swing guy.
Yeah.
And I think, where you can buy minutes with him at the 5, even, especially like, with some of the guys that Missouri is bringing in, lengthwise at the 3 and 4 position. But you can also play with the 4. And especially like as that offensive component, continues to expand as he's, able to, continue to shoot the ball better. All of a sudden, that's something that you have to pay attention to, as like a corner kick out or a trailer on a secondary break. So really, really nice piece if they can kind of get that one done. And it does sort of feel like, with the way that Missouri made him a priority sort of early, that this is a similar to kind of like Chuck Love, that if they really, really wanted to press and get him to shut it down early, kind of feel like they might be able to.
They offered him on April 29, 2022. So we're at what, 2 years now since that offer went out?
Yeah.
That's a long time to prioritize a kid. And they got him on campus for an unofficial in October of 2022. And I think he's been back again. So like they've put in the legwork there. That's a guy that if you feel like you're on good terms and you want to push, you would want to close. But the board right now, realistically, probably it's hard for me to see it expanding much beyond that. Like I would say they hosted Jasper Johnson in the fall.
I did want to talk a little bit about Johnson.
I don't think they've like punted on that. I think the difference is like, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze at the end of the day there? Jasper's at the point where he's forgetting places he visited. Like in interviews, he's forgetting, spots he's been to. A school in Lexington is going to have a lot of money and motivation to keep him home. A school in Louisville is going to...
He's a Lexington native, right?
He's from...
Kind of.
He's from basically smack dab between Lexington and Louisville. It's a fantastic
the Buffalo
narrative.
Trace Distillery?
Not near Frankfurt. Not near Frankfurt, no. But, when I talked to him last month, he said, he's expecting Louisville to go really hard after him. Coach Cal was going really, really hard after him. I think he likes it. I think he clearly likes the staff. They've made a real effort to come see him when he was at Link this past year down in Branson. They had a really good plan for him. They've been really, really candid with him about where he can grow and get better. He is friends with Aaron Rowe, so there's a connection there, and a trust that's there. And, he was very forthcoming saying, I feel comfortable playing off the ball if I'm next to Aaron. I have no question in my mind I could do that. So I think that there's a comfort level there. It's just going to be, he's visited North Carolina. He's going to visit Baylor. He's going to have 2 schools close to home there. So like the question becomes sort of like Dorian Jones, who's been prioritized by Ohio State for a long time. How many of these kind of really rugged battles can you stay in? I think the fact that if Harrelson's the guy right now that's higher up the board would suggest that's not going to be easy. They're going to be fighting 3 really good in-state schools here and 3 really good coaches. So if they're staying in the mix for Harrelson, that would suggest to me that like that's a battle where I think they feel like they maybe have more traction at this point. And Jasper, national guys I think reported a couple weeks ago, he's basically reopened things up. Like that top 10 list he put out in January may not be relevant anymore. So do you want to start from scratch in April or May for this type of situation? I'm not sure. I don't think Missouri would say that it's punted, but I think, the fact that, he's not kind of in that top 5 or 6 kind of gives us a realistic idea about where things stand in the real world and in practical terms at this juncture.
Yeah, and him sort of being in that sort of like combo swing position, I think, I don't think any of us are anticipating like Ant Robinson sort of, being the kind of guy who's looking at bouncing to the NBA draft here, and seems to be happy with his development, path with the staff. So he's probably a guy still going to be, on the roster. And then you have Aaron Rowe coming on as like a ball handler. And not that a guy like Jasper's, he's an incredibly talented kid. I think I'm more talking about like the need for Missouri is certainly lessened a bit, by how they've approached, the previous classes, and why I think somebody like Harrelson is probably higher up on the board for them. Because of the versatility of him being able to be like, well, he can bring up the ball, he can also guard fours, and I think Johnson is a guy who's going to be probably a 1 or a 2.
Yep.
And playing that, and then you're fighting off North Carolina, you're fighting off, basically hometown schools that are both considered blue bloods, and a whole lot of other
coaches with a lot of NIL to help them get started.
and Cal, I'm sure, is probably not going to give up on
Cal's not going
the
away
either. So
No.
Cal's certainly picked up where he left off at Kentucky. And Fayetteville, and recruiting a lot of high level, like 5-star level kids, and down there. So it would make a lot of sense for me to sort of see them, maybe like not give up, but deprioritize, that race, and maybe think that they could accomplish more with Harrelson.
Yeah, the only other name too that like another name I would say is Efiosa Oliogu took a visit in the fall. That's been one where I think has fallen down the board just because nobody knows for sure if he's 24 or 25.
Yeah.
If he's going to reclassify. If he's going to reclassify in 24, there is no room for him at the inn in Columbia. Like, just not any room. And, he's a guy that's sort of been, rumored as a Maryland lean for a while. His AAU program is Under Armour affiliated. Maryland is Under Armour affiliated. You can draw however many, connections you want to through that, which again, not a problem, but that's just that's just a reality, and the one that we accept in this day and age, and we have no problem with, but it's there. So I think Oliogu is a guy who's probably fallen down the board a little bit. The other name I would sort of think that, we looked at a little bit last fall was a Terrion Burgess, who's out of Benton, Arkansas, kind of in the same 4-5 range as a Nick Randall. Little bit leaner, probably more of a, I'd say graceful, player, really lean, can kind of move smoothly. The question there is going to be, Ole Miss has really put in a lot of legwork. Cal is there. If Cal would like to come down, that's renewed. And just, I think the question for Missouri is going to be, he's a guy whose frame is still really, really lean, and Missouri's got, a really lean 4 in Trent Pierce. Aiden Shaw is not like a wisp, but Aiden Shaw is a lean 4. If they, flex Marcus Allen down, he's kind of a long, kind of not thin, but a longer body, not more of a traditional 4. Do you want to get another really skinny kind of 4 guy to plug into that spot? And, functionally to me, like you look at the composite rating, and we've talked about this before, like if Burgess is like 60 or 70 and you think that, Randall's around 110, functionally the gap between them, if you even looked at like the rating points, is very narrow. To me, at that point, it gets down to, what do you think fits? What do you think your roster needs? And I just think Randall at this point is probably a better fit for them and where they are at this point in the roster construction. Not to say that, like, if Burgess was like, I absolutely love it here, I want to come. He's played with Honor Batang. They were AAU teammates with Arkansas Hawks. But, you just sort of look at the board and you might go, maybe Nick Randall's a little bit more of, physical profile of what they want, and his game sort of fits more where that, roster is at this point. But, Burgess is not completely out of the mix, but I just figured I would sort of explain that, Johnson, Oliogu, and Burgess, I think, are a little bit lower, as we come into spring than where they were last fall. So but that's still what we're talking about. Probably 7, 8 names on a board of 50 guys at this point. Like,
and I would also add, like, it's the beginning of May. You can always,
offer more guys.
Yeah, you could see somebody that you really like that maybe you weren't recruiting. They've shown in the past that they could close pretty quickly on guys. When you sort of look at how the Trent Pierce recruitment went, there's a guy that they like that sort of fits what they want to do. I think there's also I think that's the board. I don't necessarily think that like they're done, but I do think that we've got a good handle on what they want, and also like about what they're looking at positionally.
The way that this staff has sort of worked too, at least in the last 3 years, is they've been between 40 and 50 offers. They get around 10 to 15 visits, and they close about 10% of the guys they offer. So if you're looking at 3 spots right now, they're probably having 6 to 7 names. Might sound thin, but that makes sense. I mean, they've got 48 names, maybe 10 are ones that they have some traction with. They've gotten 4 or 5 to campus. They've closed 1. So, like, I think they're in the right range for the board there. I think it would take, if you look at other guys that are higher up on the board, national level guys, they're all taking visits or cutting lists. So I think this is it's not hard and fast, but I think it's more advanced than I think people would think at this point in the calendar. But we'll see. The staff has not been able to get out on the road yet. They haven't been able to see the first 2, sessions for grassroots circuits. So we'll see. Guys get into gyms, they get into back gyms, they get into other games, and they inevitably see, like you said, somebody catch a heater, and maybe you throw an offer and see what you can do. But right now, as we start, I feel like there's a pretty good grip on 6 to 7 names that people can track as they move through the spring.
Yeah, having fewer names to pay attention to is not necessarily a bad thing. It
certainly makes my streaming schedule easier. Certainly makes that easier.
Yeah, well, and it also, it's easier to to deal with when you're talking about like how you're going to divvy up your name, image, and likeness funds. Like what like who fans need to be paying attention to. I think that's one of those things. Like if you're listening to this podcast, or watching us on YouTube, chances are you are at least somewhat familiar with a lot of these names. But I think it's a good sign that our staff, the Missouri staff, is this focused and also this competent that you feel like, they should be able to get 3 guys off of their 6-7 man board.
Yeah, and the way I would sort of look at it is I pulled up the projection here. I mean, they've got right now probably 5 fifth-year guys. 5 guys who'll be fifth-year guys on the roster, and Tamar Bates. So that's 6 openings. They filled one with Aaron Rowe. They will have on paper right now for sure, if they were to land Josh Gray, 4 to 5 openings next spring. If you're taking 3 high school kids, presumably a PG, a wing, and a post, that makes next spring really projectable for you. You need a combo guard, a hybrid, and then wherever the best player available is. So, taking, knowing where the board is right now, knowing you have 5 to 6 spots, knowing you're going to fill half with high school kids, being able to get those kids in early and then be able to project your, spring needs right now is big. It's really, really big because as we can attest, the portal scouting doesn't just start in March. So having early lists makes it easier for them. So I think there's, I think I told Watkins the other day, or Matt Watkins the other day, that there's a level now of sort of predictability here. I think the first 2 years we were sort of like, oh my God, they're throwing out 50 offers a cycle. Well, you do that so you can start forging relationships. So when you get to the 25 class, you can look at the guys atop the board and go, oh, they've recruited all these priorities for 18 months, 2 years. They were one of their first 5 or 6 offers that they had. They were one of the first guys, one of the first programs to host them on campus. This is where that comes into play. So when you get to go time, this is it. This is where you start getting ready to really make that push to cement relationships. It's there. And you've got a sense of what you're doing and where your staff has got to be and what they're looking to accomplish. So when they come out of this summer, they can know going into fall, we know what we need in 26. We have a sense of what we're going to need in the portal in 25. A lot of that, beehive of activity, the first, 18 months on the job was to set it up. So you had this kind of structure for when you got into this time of the year. So it's a credit to them for doing a lot of legwork. So presumably they have this kind of projectability as they move forward into 25 and even start looking at 26 kids.
Correct. We did have a question on the forum about Andreas Holst.
Was that Watkins with a burner?
Possibly.
Yeah. Man, I'm not deep enough into FIBA yet.
I would say this. I love the idea that they might show an interest in international players. I think it's a
untapped market.
Yeah, it's a market that you could really do well in if you mine it correctly. That said, I'm gonna hold reserve judgment on Dennis Gates and CY on their forays into the international market until we start seeing some guys actually hit campus.
Yeah.
And by hit campus, I mean, showing up for visits and stuff like that. If they're able to kind of get guys on campus for visits, then I'll consider those kinds of offers a little bit more solid.
Yeah, they've offered some kids out of Canadian programs. I think probably 2 or 3 in each of the last couple of cycles. They offered Eric Ryby out of Germany in this 25 cycle, but he's probably going to stay closer to the Bullis School in the DMV. I think, I've said this, privately, I wish they would show up at every NBA Academy event they could. We loved Ruben Chinyelu this spring. That was an NBA Academy kid, and that's probably why Florida got him, because they have 2 NBA Academy kids on their roster. You know how Todd got plugged in there? It was working for Kyle Smith, who put in a lot of legwork going to those and, taking, guys who weren't at the tippy top of the roster for NBA Academy, but, taking on some developmental guys and, having a little bit of success with them. And now they can, play in that market a little bit. We've seen Randy Bennett do it in Australia. We've seen Tommy Lloyd do it at Gonzaga in Arizona. We saw UCLA try it a little bit this year. So I think that as we move forward, not a lot of these kids are going to be able to go straight into the NBA, pipeline or the G League pipeline, but they're really hyper skilled. They're used to college life. They've been doing it since they were 14, 15, probably at an academy in their home country, and then moving to be in an NBA academy. To do that and to be successful requires also a certain, focus and tenacity that, I don't think sometimes, our kids on the domestic side have had. Not that they're, weak-minded, but they just haven't really experienced that first taste of being away from home and true college life in some cases. Whereas I think sometimes the NBA Academy kids have, and it's just another way to sort of diversify your pipeline. So, is Andreas Holst the guy that does that? No, but if they wanted to start, going to to camps in Europe and they wanted to start looking at NBA Academy kids, I would certainly applaud that because I think there's some really talented guys there that can, especially if you believe the way Dennis wants to play offensively. I think there's some talent there that can help them if that's an avenue they want to explore. But we'll see. We'll see if that's a route they pursue.
Well, I think that does our as much as we can do on the 2025 class for now. I do kind of want to talk about what our plans are. So we are going to take next week off, regardless of any news items that come up. Looking at the RockM Radio schedule, you should have a new episode of Before the Box Score recording next week. And there's also another episode of the Mo Show. I don't want to spoil anything, but I believe there's a certain Mizzou quarterback who also has a pretty well-known YouTube channel these days. First name might sound like Chase, or maybe it is Chase. It's my way of saying that Chad is going to have Chase Daniel on the Mo Show next week.
Terrible teaser.
Hey, I don't have anything written. I'm just looking at stuff.
You could prep one.
So so with 2 episodes of stuff coming next week, I thought we should just take the week off and kind of switch to off-season mode. My guess is that in 2 weeks we will have something to talk about, and we can actually talk about a finished roster by that point. So that's what we're going to do. So no dive cuts next week. We will make sure that there's a live recording of Before the Box Score. And then subscribers can get the full episode of the Mo Show on Friday. If you are not subscribed, please do so to this podcast on your favorite podcast app. Also, please subscribe to RockM.Plus. Things are going pretty well. We are continuing to add people on the reg. Conversations are starting to pick up, and I think it's going really well. So I'm excited about that. So head over to RockM.Plus if you're not already, and get signed up. And we will see you on the RockM.Plus forums. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here, Matt?
Thanks for sticking with us as we go through this process and for showing up and enjoying Portal season with us. We hope that you found it informative and somewhat entertaining as we go through nearly 2 months of basically weekly recruiting updates. Join us, talk to us. We have fun there. I think it's good to interact with folks, and it's been nice to sort of have like I've said repeatedly on this pod before, kind of a more fluid sharing of content there. We're not always writing fully formed pieces. Sometimes it's just some thoughts or just some data that we've seen that we want to put up, and we think it's good for you all to see, and we think it might be helpful. So it's been nice to sort of have that happy medium and be able to have you all respond to it. So we'd love to have you come on over and join us and give us your thoughts as well.
I agree. So in a couple weeks, we'll be back with more to talk about, hopefully a completed roster. Until that time, thank you everybody for tuning in, for watching, and for downloading all of these episodes. We appreciate you, the listeners, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks, everybody.